All right, so I'll just move the script. Oh, it's a bit awkward. No, I'll go this way. It's facing the camera, isn't it? All right then, so just to give a bit of background into this sort of exercise, really these labs started 2 years ago when this new building went up, well last year wasn't it? It's a $10 million building, and really what this public health building wants to do is get all those sort of satellite public health departments, you know, the ones that do vaccines and things like that with food safety, and put them all in one building, which you see now. So the food safety division here, which you met Tamika, who's, well, she's like the manager of the unit, who does all the food inspections. But one part of it, you might be thinking, what's a kitchen doing in a public health place? So what do you think this kitchen's for? Is it for them to make the lunches and that, or is there another reason for it?
Training like food safety workers, like restaurants.
Yeah, you're right. So, you know, essentially with the public health municipal, it's very small processes, also mainly food service outlets. And this is not a domestic kitchen, because there's not many domestic kitchens with free sinks and a really sterilising dishwasher at the back there. This represents a sort of commercial kitchen, and it's regulation now that at least one person has to have a food safety certificate training, and this is what they do it here. Now, food safety training might seem very easy, it might seem a very easy concept, but in reality it's one of the biggest challenges in the industry today, because you can write down regulations, you can write down SOPs and things like that, but if people don't follow them, there's no point in having them, is there? So food safety training really stemmed out from a sort of concept called food safety culture. So does anyone know what food safety culture is? I think that's a no. Well, food safety culture is this concept where it was conceived, thought of in year 2000, because since 1995 we've had HACCP and all these food safety regulations, but the outbreaks were still going on. And you know, people don't say, well, it's not so much the regulation that's at fault, it's the people who don't follow it at fault. And so food safety culture is this sort of beliefs, actions, attitudes towards food safety of a company. So like all attitudes, you can have a nice attitude or you can have a bad attitude, and so people can be between those two. And in terms of food safety culture attitudes, there was a sort of survey developed a few years ago that separated people out into 4 groups. One, non-compliers, which basically means that they know what they're doing wrong, but they don't care, you know, essentially they flout the law. Then you get the ones that, the ignorant ones, say, well, I didn't know you could leave chicken at room temperature all that time. Then you have the ones that really stick to the regulation. If it's not written in the regulation, they won't do it. And then you've got the other ones, which are the proactive people, ones that go beyond the food safety realm. And so with food safety culture, it's always down to that, and that you can give people knowledge, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have it. And there's a few examples of food safety culture from the Maple Leaf case, the Peanut Corporation of America, Jensen Brothers, things like that, which are significant. Has anyone heard of any of those outbreaks? So just as an exercise then, because we've got to give it a bit of time, we've got a bit of time here. So the sort of Peanut Corporation of America was when they were sending out peanut paste contaminated with salmonella, even though they knew it was contaminated for one thing, or they were using results from a different batch to support so they could get the product out quicker. So based on those sort of 4 categories I gave you, i.e. non-compliers, ignorant, leaders, and the other one, which one was the other one?
Proactive.
That's right, the proactive one. Which one would you think the Peanut Corporation of America cake went into? Yeah, non-compliance deliberately. Then you get the Jensen Brothers, who were involved in the cantaloupe outbreak. So what they did is that they were producing cantaloupes in Colorado. The consumers said they want to go organic, so they got rid of all the chemicals, sanitizers. They got rid of artificial chemical fertiliser, synthetic from manure, and lo and behold, it had a listeria outbreak that affected 300 and killed 28, I think it was. So would you say they're leaders, compliers, non-compliers, just ignorant, or stick to the regulation?
Ignorant?
Yeah, ignorance, and that was their defence, and that's what they got up with, even though it was a bit suspect against me. And the last example is the maple leaf, which is an interesting outbreak. Maple leaf, this happened in 2008, where Maple Leaf Foods were implicated in a big listeria outbreak, killing 21 people, affecting some people say thousands, definitely hundreds. And in their sort of regime, what they were finding is that the listeria was being detected sporadically, and their production sort of phase was ramping up, so the sanitation crew got less and less time to clean the plant. So what happened was eventually this listeria outbreak occurred, and we came out of all this, we're sorry, and this sort of concept of food safety culture. But what would you say they were? Were they ignorant? Were they very proactive? Were they sticking to the regulation? Or were the leaders?
Leaders basically trying to cut down.
Ignorance.
How about sticking to the regulations?
Which one, sorry?
Sticking to the regulations, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Because their argument was saying that we stuck to the regulation, no one told us we had to do trend analysis or anything like that. So those are the sort of different categories. But anyway, we're digressing a bit, aren't we? So today's fun, isn't it? So today what we're doing is food safety training. And it's not like a presentation we do in class where you stand up with your PowerPoints and you say this, this and this. Really, with training, food safety training, and I don't know if anybody works in fast food restaurants here, do they?
She does.
He does.
Oh, which one? Well, don't tell me which one. Just, but what sort of food safety training did they give you to start with?
Rooms and stuff, but then they kind of did the dishwashing sanitation.
So it was hands-on. It wasn't. How effective do you think that training was? Like, do you train and then maybe never do it again, or someone tells you, well, if you do it this way, it cuts corners.
Yeah, I consider kind of leadership skills, but
Oh, no, it's not right.
Well,
We're all
why?
friends here. It goes nowhere. But it's very common, that, isn't it? And that's a challenge, because most people, when they talk about food safety culture, they correlate knowledge with behaviour, when it's not like that at all. You can train someone to do something, but they'll always find a very quick way to say, how can we do shortcuts in that? And that's where the weakness comes. So when you're doing this exercise in terms of training then, that's the sort of part you have to do. And we're going to let you do your presentation. And as I mentioned, assessment is very important. You need a baseline to start with to show how effective your training is. So I'm going to leave that to you to do. You've got plenty of time. As long as we're out here for 10:15, you can take as long as you like. And the way we're going to mark this is two ways. So one, I'm going to really mark you on the fact, have you covered the points? Was the delivery good? Was your assessment good? And things like that. And what the audience are going to do is get a piece of paper, hopefully, if you haven't got some, I'll have to get some for you. And what I want you to do is just write down the main points to talk about, which you think are significant. Because a bit like when I give a lecture, I tend to talk too much and people tend not to get the actual point I'm trying to make. So all you have to do is write a list down of what are the key points, what to take home message, what have you learned from this sort of exercise. You don't have to put your name on it, because you're going to hand them to me then, and I'm going to say, that's the sign of the effectiveness. If you manage to convince them of all these key points, all well and good. All right, so any questions about anything before kick off, or no? All right, so I guess you're doing sanitation by the looks of everything here. So this is to do with the importance of sanitation. All right, I'll take it away.
So, hi guys, we're going to be talking to you about sanitation. So, my name is Ikra.
I'm Kamini.
Feet.
And yeah, so to start off, why don't we discuss why is sanitation important in the first place? Can anyone kind of come up with some ideas? No? Yeah?
It reduces the amount of bacteria in the area, which, as many of them are warm sensing, it'll reduce their ability to become harmful or to spoil food.
Yeah, exactly. But why do we want to reduce the amount of bacteria? Like, what's the big deal if they're there?
They can cause illness.
Yeah, so we want to basically sanitize, like keep our equipment clean, keep our hands clean, anything that might come in contact with food, because if the microbes are in the food, then that can cause a foodborne illness. So obviously we don't want that. So to start off,
Oh, okay. So obviously you can't keep everything like absolutely sterile, like no microbes all the time. But the best thing you can do is sanitize everything. So does anybody know the difference between sanitization and sterilization?
So it's sanitizing, like reducing the numbers, while really sterilizing is like killing.
Exactly. So basically we can't fully sterilize it, but we can sanitize it, making sure we reduce those numbers to like a safe enough level. Yeah, so feasible.
So like in a kitchen environment, one best method for sanitization is prevention. So we want to prevent cross-contamination. And there are many tools for sanitation. So there are many different sanitizers. So you can use bleach, which is the most popular one, because they use it in hospitals. And like now, hospitals use a lot of different ones, and there's resistance to those kind of formulas, but bleach is no resistant at all. So hospitals are trying to get back into it. So does anyone know like the effective amount of bleach in water, the ppm? No. So the most effective one in the kitchen would be 100 ppm. So I have a liter here, or approximately a liter. So you want to add 2 mils into it. So you just use the V1 C1 equals V2 C2 formula to get that. So I don't think I need to demonstrate this. You guys know how to do that.
Yeah, so that's basically used as a contact sterilizer for surfaces and things that have touched like raw meat and raw vegetables and everything like that. You're gonna want to make sure that you like try to limit the amount that you actually like touch with raw material. So basically, I'm going to demonstrate how to effectively wash a dish. Something that my roommates can't actually do properly. But so what I have on here is a glow germ kit, and basically it goes under UV. Right. So that would be all your dirty food and maybe something that has harmful pathogens in it, it's sitting on the table for a long time. So what you're going to want to do is fill up the sink a little bit with some soap. Make sure that you're using a dish detergent, because the difference between a dish detergent and a dish soap, detergents actually take the grease and yeah, they make the grease and fats and stuff like that soluble, so this actually washes away the actual debris. And what it does is it physically remove the bacteria. So instead of, it won't actually kill it, just because most of them don't actually have a sanitizer in them, but it just actually physically removes it. So you're gonna want a little bit of that in there. You're gonna want to make sure you use hot water. That just, it doesn't actually, it's hot enough to kill the microbes themselves, but it actually makes the dish soap work better at removing certain debris. Too much water, just a sip of water. So I'm using a dishcloth instead of a dish sponge. Does anybody know why? So the reason is these things are a sponge for bacteria. These things get like completely loaded with bacteria, and it's just like absolute nightmare. So anyways. after you wash it, make sure you rinse it off with hot water again. So really hoping this works. Nice and clean, okay? Now, this thing would be full of bacteria. And this shows it too, but a little bit. Didn't really work too well, but it would be full of bacteria if you're actually like washing like dishes with it. So you're gonna want to make sure you sterilize these things after you're done with them. Generally in the household, you can just boil them. Otherwise, you can just wash them with bleach or stuff like that. Okay.
So we talked about the importance of keeping your surfaces clean, so any surfaces that your food will come in contact with. And we also talked about how you should be keeping your utensils clean, so which is another surface that your food is coming in contact with. But something most people don't think about is your hands also directly come in contact with food, especially ready to eat food that you're just preparing on the spot. So in the food industry, their standards are much higher than if you're just preparing food at home. So they'll actually also have extra precautions by using things like gloves and hairnets. So the gloves will prevent your hands from coming in direct contact with the food. And the hairnet, basically, it's a part of sanitation because it'll prevent your hair from falling into the food. So that's also another really important thing. So all of these things in the food industry are actually called personal protective equipment, so PPE. And I'm just going to demonstrate to you guys how to wash your hands, essentially. So when you're working in the food industry, or even hopefully when you're preparing food at home, you should always wash your hands as your first procedure. So I'm just going to wash my hands. So let's see. Okay, what do you guys think about the way I wash my hands? Hopefully everyone can see. Do you guys agree with what I did? Okay.
The handles that you used could be a source of cross-contamination, so it would be better to close them with something other than your hands after you wash them.
Right, exactly. So one thing I did is when I was washing my hands, after I was done, I closed the handles right here. I closed the handles right here with my hands again directly. So this surface right here, it actually is a source of contamination. So there are microbes on this surface. So I washed my hands and then I touched a surface which could cause contamination a second time. Did anyone notice anything else which I could have done better? Okay, so one thing, I don't know how many people caught on to it. I was trying to hold up my hands like this, but I'm actually wearing a ring. So when you're washing your hands, you need to make sure that you're removing any jewelry that you're wearing. So in the food industry, you're actually expected to also wash like your forearms, so you should also be removing any bracelets. Does anyone know why it's important to remove jewelry before you wash your hands? No. Okay, so the reason why is because this actually, when I'm wearing things like jewelry, like rings or bracelets on my hands, this actually becomes like a microbial niche. So microbes can actually use these areas to help them survive better. So if you're thinking about it, when I'm washing my hands, if I have a ring on, the soap can't really touch the regions that are underneath the ring, right? My skin, which is being covered, or regions around there. So I could still have microbes on my hands, even if I'm wearing my jewelry. Another thing is I was using this bar soap. Does anyone know anything, like why should you not use bar soap? Any reasons? Okay, so,
sorry.
yeah,
It comes in contact with the dirty hands, like when you're touching it the first time, so it could transfer microbes to the soap. I don't know.
yeah, so bar soap, actually, it is a pretty good place to build up microbes. So when you're just leaving it on the counter, the microbes, like, they can build up on your bar soap. So you're using something which is contaminated to wash your hands, to sanitize. So it doesn't really make any sense. So instead, what you should try to use is hand soap, so which comes in bottles like these. So this is more safe than bar soap. And another thing is when I was washing my hands, I just kind of really quickly went underneath the water. There's something called the 20-second rule. So that basically means that you need to be lathering your hands for a minimum of 15 to 20 seconds. And you want to make sure you're getting the back of your hand, underneath your nails, between your fingers. So these are your 3 problem regions. So you have to make sure that you're scrubbing really carefully in those 3 regions to make sure you're getting rid of all microbes on your hands. Okay, that was a lot of information. So I actually want someone to come up and volunteer and see if they can wash their hands properly. So what we're actually going to do is a really cool experiment. So this is Glow Germ gel. So what you're going to do is you put this on your hands. So this is basically your hands are dirty, they're contaminated. So we actually also use it on the plate. When we use the light, you can see, like those are the germs, the microbes on your hands. You're going to wash your hands, and we're basically going to see how effective you are at washing your hands by using the light afterwards. So who wants to come up and volunteer? It'll be really fun. Okay, cool. Okay.
It's
Oh, gotcha. Just like, not really honest.
Some
Yeah, really get
okay.
those germs in there. There. Can you like see? So can you see it like
Yeah, okay.
now? Wash your hands.
And a cool trick for the 20-second rule is if you're bad at keeping time, you can sing happy birthday 2 times. So that's 20 seconds. Awesome.
Good
Okay,
job.
you have good hand practices. So just to review, you should use your 20-second rule. Take off all jewelry before you wash your hands. Don't directly touch the faucet again to close it. So you should use your elbow like she demonstrated, or you can take your paper towel and you can close it that way. And yeah, so that should be everything for washing your hands. Now when should you wash your hands?
I'm just gonna give you guys a little spiel about that. So does anyone know exactly when you should wash your hands? Anything at all?
Before
Okay.
one time.
after you cook things.
Okay.
Anytime after like touching meat or like switching between stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, you should wash your hands before and after food preparation, before eating, after you get a cut on your hand, after you cough, sneeze, blow your nose, touching animals, or basically doing like any household things before you cook. Okay, and also if you're switching between meat and veggies, you should always wash your hands after touching meat, after touching veggies and fruits, stuff like that. Okay?
And the last point we're going to talk about is basically hand sanitizers. So hand sanitizers are pretty convenient. You can kind of stick them on the wall and they're always easily accessible and available. So they're useful for that reason because you can kind of always have them with you and you can even keep them in your bag if you want. But if you're using a hand sanitizer, is that the same thing as washing your hands? No, why not? Yeah, so the reason why in the food industry, when you go to Subway, the person doesn't just put on some hand sanitizer, hopefully, and then starts making your food for you. They have to wash their hands instead, is because washing your hands kills more germs, and hand sanitizers actually do not kill all types of germs, despite their claim 99% will be eliminated. And it's also not very effective if your hands are actually dirty. So if there's like grease or something on your hands, and then if they're putting hand sanitizer on top of that, it's just really gonna turn into a mess. So always wash your hands, and hand sanitizers are good, they're useful, but it is not a hand washing replacement. So you cannot replace hand washing with hand sanitizer.
So I'm gonna show you cleaning the bench. So I have bleacher solution. So you just want to pour it on the bench. Use a paper towel and slather it around. Does anyone know why we need to leave solution on the bench a certain amount of time and why we do that? Yeah.
It takes a while for the sanitizer to actually interact with the microbes and either kill them or inactivate them.
So for bleach, it takes approximately, for most microbes in the kitchen, like 10 minutes. You should just leave it for 10 minutes. The thing with bleach is that it doesn't leave any toxic residues, so that's an advantage over other sanitizers or bench.
Okay, so that's a pretty useful tip too. Does anyone have any questions about sanitizing your hands, the equipment, utensils, anything at all? No? Okay. Great. Yay.
All right, so what you've done, then you've written down the main points I was taking out. Any comments about the delivery? What you can think of?
It's not about the delivery, but I really like the glow light thing. I don't know if I do that one.
Yeah, the glow germ. Yeah, it's always a hit, isn't it? But interesting, also you did wrong with the hand washing even then. Can anybody think what it was? You should, yeah, I think you know, don't you? But,
They turned the taps on for her. I don't know if that was.
no, like, have you noticed how many sink units are in this place?
Oh yeah, they didn't use this thing.
Yeah, like I say, you shouldn't use the one for washing as a hand washing station at the same time. That's another thing, isn't it? What I liked about the presentation is the way you demonstrated wrongly to start with. Yeah, because people accept it. That's what I mean. In terms of training, you could say anything up there and they'll believe you because they say you must be an authority figure to do that. And then you got somebody from the audience to actually do it, because that's really what it's down to. But even that was a bit artificial, because all poor eyes were on you then, and you think, well, I've got to do this really right. And it's almost like saying, casually saying, could someone come up and wash their hands? And and they're probably just doing it subconsciously whilst you're talking to the audience, and you can look around and see what they're doing wrong. But no, it's an interesting way of actually giving the message across. One of the sort of things I would have improved on though is the consequences. So when people do food safety training, there's two sort of strands to do. They do entertaining, as in glow germ and everything. And the other one is to say, God, if you don't do this, you're going to kill people, and you're going to go to jail, and you're going to pay a fine. So it's the consequence of not doing something as well, which brings it out sometimes. But I thought the hand washing part was done really good. Now, the other sort of parts, and I must admit, well, apart from the rings, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I know you're supposed to take rings off just so you can lose them and get in the sink. But in actual fact, some of the metals are actually antimicrobial, silver and gold. That's a digression, isn't it? So when we came to the sanitizer, there's a few interesting things we talked about. First, you started saying about bleach, why it's used. You say, it's non-toxic. Is that quite true?
Well, it doesn't leave a toxic residue on the bench.
Oh, well, in actual fact, it does. This is why they're trying to get rid of it. They've got disinfection byproducts, which are supposed to be carcinogenic. But I think what would have really helped, and I don't know if everybody in the audience would have agreed, what would have helped to demonstrate how to sanitize a surface? Like, what would you have liked to have seen? A dirty surface, right. Yeah, you would have liked to see the dirty surface and then gone through the regime and said, well, you've got to clear the organics away first, then apply detergent, then apply the sanitizer for a set amount of time. But the other sort of thing is, how would you know you've done well? Like, how would you know you've cleaned that surface?
Swab it.
Well, that's what I'm saying to you. We have an ATP meter in there. So the ATP meter, and the other sort of thing you nearly did, and I was wishing you would have done it, is when you said, well, you just make 100 ppm solution up. So does anyone know how much you would need to add of that bleach to that container to get 100 ppm?
If that thing's like 5.25%.
Well, they're usually concentrated, so it's actually a bit more, coming in around about. But, well, no, just guess, we don't need to be precise to say 0.1 mil or something like that, but how much do you think you would need to add of that bleach to that container? Yeah, exactly, nobody knows, because it's, you don't give it context.
40 milliliters in 1 liter.
There you are, then you know that. So it's good to demonstrate that, but one other sort of thing when you're doing a health inspection is how do you know you've got the right amount of chlorine? Like, does anyone own a swimming pool here?
Test strips.
Oh, there you go, you're in a swimming pool. Yeah, you need test strips, and when they go into inspect a place, you need those test strips to do, because bleach is unstable. And then you briefly said about other sanitizers. And the thing is, it's always things you want to say, well, there's other sanitizers out there, but if you don't give them some sort of context, saying, well, you know, this peroxyacetic acid is much better than survival organics, then again, it's just like a loose term you're throwing out there, saying, well, there's others available, but if you've got to make use of the time, because everyone's sort of consciousness has only a limited amount of information you can take in. And if you, well, I must say, I'm guilty of this myself, if you throw out lots of different things, your message doesn't get home. And I think one of the big things that was missing is context. So, for example, you know, why, I know you started off saying, well, why do you need to clean surfaces and sanitize and talk about pathogens, but there's other things as well, isn't there? And it would have been nice just to give a bit of saying, well, you know, give examples of outbreaks, for example. Like there's an outbreak of norovirus in a few restaurants last year, and you could say, well, it's down to poor sanitation. When we talk about glove use and things like that, you know, when would you use gloves? What's the disadvantage of them? Things like that. Well, I can't go on too long again, I always do. So is there any I suppose the last question to you then. So how effective do you think the training was?
Was that for us?
Anybody. Well, I'm looking at you, you're the people who presented. So what would, I know, and he said, well, no, it's the same environment as you would get for any public health training here. So how would you test now the sort of effectiveness of your training?
Maybe.
Would you give a final exam and say, oh, you can have an extension?
Well, for food